3 times today, or twice today. Nobody wants to sit at the front. We're in charge.
We apologize for the odd configuration of the room. It feels like this is an inquisition panel. Good morning. Welcome to the Coordinating Board. Boy, does it seem that long since we convened these groups last time? We're already getting ready for the 2011 session. I'm Raymond Paredes, the Commissioner of Higher Education, and I thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here this morning. We know that you're all getting ready for the school year, and we know it's a significant effort for you to come here and help us out on what is really a very important matter. I'm going to make some very brief and general comments and then turn it over to my colleague, Susan Brown. I simply want to say that the work of the Formula Funding Advisory Committees is always critically important, but particularly so this time around. Is all of you know, depending on the numbers and the source, or depending on the source and depending on the timing at which you receive the information, we're projecting a very significant state deficit in the 2011 session. And so it's very important for the Formula Funding Advisory Committees to take that into account as they make their recommendations prior to the session. As many of you know, the Coordinating Board took the position last session that we had to start shifting from formula funding policies that were based on inputs and move to a model that is based on results. I urge you very strongly to take a look at this issue once again. If you look at national data, if you look at the Delta Cost Project, if you look at the work that the Lumina Foundation is trying to do, making opportunity affordable, if you look at the initiatives of the Gates Foundation, if you look at some of the comments that are coming out of Washington, and both from the White House and from the U.S. Department of Education, it's very clear that we're coming increasingly to the realization that the current model of funding higher education in this country, whether we're talking specifically about Texas or whether we're talking about public institutions around the country, is simply unsustainable. We cannot expect that states will be able to fund higher education at increasingly higher levels. One can talk about whether the state of Texas has done its share in funding higher education compared to other states, but the simple fact is that the current model is unsustainable, whether we fully fund according to the formula or whether we fund partially. We have to find ways to build cost efficiencies into higher education. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to shift more to a student-centered funding model that is based on actual performance and how well institutions do in meeting the critical educational and workforce development needs of a particular state. And I'm talking about the role of community and technical colleges in preparing students to achieve certificates and Associates of Arts degrees, and I'm talking about universities and helping students achieve the baccalaureate and beyond. We simply have to do a better job with the resources that we have, and there's plenty of evidence at both the national and the state level that that's possible. I know that one of the plaints in higher education is that we're always being asked to do more with less. But as I said, if you look at some of the studies that have been done by some of the organizations I mentioned a moment ago, there is room for achieving economies and using current levels of funding more efficiently. So I hope that we take heed of the cliche that in a crisis comes opportunity, and I hope that we use this opportunity to look at the way we fund and to create powerful incentives for institutions, both 2- and 4-year institutions, to use the limited funding we have more thoughtfully still and more carefully. I know that every institution in the state is looking at ways to do this, and I hope that this process of coming up with recommendations through the Formula Funding Advisory Committees will be the culmination of that initiative that's, as I said, taking place on every college and university campus and in every system. We look forward to the work that you do. As all of you know that have been through this process before, we at the coordinating board, we take the recommendations of the Formula Advisory Committees very seriously. And typically we make some modifications and we make some adjustments. We tweak the recommendations, but we take them very, very seriously, and we will once again. We know that you're the experts on the ground, and so we very much respect your recommendations to us. Thank you for all the hard work that you will be doing in a tough budgetary environment. With that, I'll turn it over to Susan Brown.
And again, I want to thank you for coming today. In your packets, you will see that you'll be getting is a list of all the charges for each of the different groups, and you'll be getting those in your rooms. You'll each get some information, and that will include the charges. They follow very much what the commissioner has talked about, the need to do the best we can and most efficient way, and to show that the results that we're getting in higher ed, not just basing it on input. So we'll be going over those charges in more detail in each of the breakout groups. But first I wanted to introduce Rich Petrick from the Ohio Board of Regents. They have recently gone to a completion model and outcomes-based model. His primary responsibilities have been to develop, implement, and evaluate operating and capital budgets for higher education. He's also the vice chairman of the Ohio Higher Education Facilities Commission that works with the tax-exempt bonding capacity for the private not-for-profit as well as the not-for-profit medical facilities. He's taken a leadership role in the development of the new subsidy formulas for public colleges and universities, creation of the HEI, State's Higher Education Information System, to collect the information they need, and the reform of the student financial aid system all at the same time. So he's been busy. And he's also been a consultant on numerous campuses, state, regional activities. Prior to joining the board, he was at the Ohio General Assembly at the Legislative Budget Office, and he taught at SUNY Stony Brook in Political Science Department. So help me in welcoming Rick. He's going to give a slight presentation on what they're doing in Ohio.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Susan, and thank you, Commissioner. It's really good to be back in Texas. I have a number of Texas connections, including the good work that we've been doing with a variety of national entities with Commissioner Paredes. In the distant past, your Commissioner Don Brown and I did some work when the national delegation from China visited this country. We had a dinner at the Chinese embassy many, many years ago where he displayed a combination of grace and humor that I remember to this day, and it was wonderful. My in-laws used to live in Kerrville. We would come here often to visit them, and my wife has relatives in El Paso and in Houston and Dallas who will call us every time Ohio State and Texas plays football and Texas wins the game, and we reciprocate when fortune shines the other direction. So it is good to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Susan's introduction, my list, there's another way of saying that is simply that I'm old and I've been there for a long time, so, and that accounts for those examples. I'm going to talk today about performance funding in Ohio. I want to talk about the history of that and a variety of other issues surrounding student success. I really welcome your questions, interruptions. If there's something that's not clear, I get tired of hearing my own voice. So please do interrupt, and we'll have a better conversation if you do, for clarification. And the focus of this is on how we align state resources to support student success. It's not simply the formula, but as I said, we'll also mention a student financial aid program that we've experimented with and which we'll launch again, I think, this upcoming year. So the overview, I'm going to talk a bit about performance funding in Ohio. What we've launched in 2010 and 2011 is not new, but it's an extension of where we've been over the past 10 to 15 years. I'm going to talk a bit about some elements of successful planning and implementation. We'll look at the performance-based grant initiative and talk a little bit about how we measure student success, because I think the federal measure grossly undermeasures the extent to which students are succeeding in higher education. Next slide, please. We actually started with performance funding in 1985 with a line item program called Research Challenge, when we recognized that Ohio greatly lagged the nation in terms of the volume of research, both private and publicly funded research that our universities were conducting. So we simply created a program to promote more research, and the State Research Challenge funds distributed to all universities on the basis of each university's share of sponsored research. It's a very simple formula. The more sponsored research you did in the prior year, the greater share of available funds your campus would receive, and you'd receive it in an unrestricted manner, with the thought that if a campus made the mistake of misinvesting, then they would lose a share in the subsequent year, but they would have the incentive to invest the funds well, say, in new faculty, promising young faculty, to give them teaching leave time, to build up their resource capacity, or to invest it in technology or facilities. This is one example. One of the things we do a lot is we evaluate the successes or failures of what it is we do. And this is one measure of what we think Research Challenge did for Ohio. This chart charts Ohio's per capita research and development at our public universities and two private universities that participate, indexed to the national average. So we were heading, not only we were in bad shape in 1985, but we were heading downwards. And Research Challenge at about $10 to $15 million a year provided enough leverage in combination of a variety of other things, including changes in leadership at some of the research institutions, to help project us into a positive direction. As a result of the success of Research Challenge, we created new challenge programs in the 1990s, another time when the state budgets were actually growing. And we created three new lines. One was called Access Challenge, which was focused specifically on the two-year schools and our access universities, that provided about $65 million a year to buy down tuition for access campuses. You'll see an evaluation of a mini evaluation of Success Challenge, but we did evaluate Access Challenge, and it had the effect that we expected it to have, which was to increase, obviously, access. More students, more undergraduates enrolling at the access campuses. But we actually saw a shift of enrollments at a time of economic growth from four-year to two-year schools for the most price-sensitive students, which is exactly the outcome we would have hoped to have seen. We had another line item, created a line item called Jobs Challenge, which supported non-credit job-related training at our two-year schools and a few of our four-year schools that participated in business and industry training, direct business and industry training. At the end of this program, it ended about 3 years ago, we were training between 5 and 10% of the workforce every year through direct or indirect programs, either direct programs funded by these or funded by these and other grants leveraged by these funds, and federal funds as well. And then Success Challenge was a program created for our universities, our 13 university main campuses, which was about $55 million a year. 1/3 of this amount rewarded the universities for the timely degree completion of in-state undergraduates for their baccalaureate degrees. 2/3 of it was allocated to reward universities for the baccalaureate degree completion for any at-risk student. And an at-risk student was defined and continues to be defined in Ohio as a student who is eligible for financial aid. We are not comfortable with that definition. We think we need to get better. We think we have better concepts, better definitions, but we don't have the data to fully measure what an at-risk student is. So all the funds in our challenge programs were mission-oriented, targeted, selected campuses, so that campuses were not fighting over, every sector knew what was their mission. One of the purposes of the challenges was to enhance, define, refine, and concentrate campuses on their various missions. And this simply describes what I just said before about the focus of the 4 challenge line items. When all is said and done, roughly 8 to 10% of our core funding was challenge funding, was performance-based funding, with the remaining being the enrollment-based formula. So some of the quick measures of the effects of Success Challenge. This is the time to degree for resident undergraduates decreased in about a 4-year period from 4.7 years to 4.3 years. We had an increase in the percentage of resident undergraduates graduating in less than or equal to 4 years, from 34% to 43%. The percentage of at-risk undergraduates graduating in less than or equal to 4 years increased from 20% to 26%. So there were no unintended consequences of which we were aware. We would have an annual student success convention at one of the campuses, and campuses would share their experiences, what they did, how they redefined or revised their student tutoring and student advising, the structure of the curriculum. You find a host of things where there were capstone, for example. One campus had a required capstone course that seemed to be offered once every 3 semesters. It made it extremely difficult for students to graduate in 4 years, and they say it was a simple matter of making that course more available every semester that changed their performance on the measure. We currently have a new chancellor and a new system of governance in Ohio. Chancellor Fingerhut is our chancellor. He is now a direct appointee of the governor. Prior to May of 2007, we had a Board of Regents, which was appointed by the governor, and the Board of Regents appointed the chancellor. So now the higher education is a cabinet agency, and it is a much more direct responsibility of the governor. The first assignment that Chancellor Fingerhut received in May of 2007 was to create a 10-year plan by September of 2007. We were fortunate to get the General Assembly to extend that deadline to April of 2007. But we do have a strategic plan which is posted on our webpage, which is specific in its goals and metrics, its short-term and long-term goals, and it is our living Bible. The Chancellor carries the strategic plan with him everywhere he goes. You will find on page 104 our metrics, the metrics by which we measure success. Every year or two we update where we are relative to those metrics, and he reminds every audience, staff, agencies and campuses and media, etc., about the strategic plan, about why we need to do what we're doing, and how well we're doing, and what we need to change to move in the correct direction. Basically, the goals are, it will be no surprise to this group, to enroll and graduate more Ohioans, also to recruit and retain more highly educated non-Ohioans. We need to increase state aid, greatly improve efficiency, because we probably won't be able to increase state aid as much as we would like to. And we need to lower the out-of-pocket expenses for undergraduates in every way possible. We need to increase the participation and success by first-generation and other underrepresented minorities in Ohio. And we need to vastly, and this is probably the biggest assignment for Ohio, we need to increase participation and success by adult students. Our high school pipeline is drying up. Unlike Texas, our number of high school graduates in Ohio will decrease by 15% over the next 5 years. So the need to, the ultimate goal here is to have 60% of the working population with a post-secondary degree. If we are to achieve that, we're not going to do it by relying upon the traditional high school pipeline, but we need to get more working adults into higher education, and we have to change the minds of many campuses to start treating these students as workers who learn and not learners who work, and that's one of the goals of the strategic plan. Next slide, please. So, as part of our goal, we have a major shift to success-based formulas to both not just educate, but also educate successfully more Ohioans. We created 3 new formulas. One for the university main campuses, one for the university regional campuses, and one for the community colleges. This was endorsed enthusiastically by the governor and the General Assembly in our current budget bill, House Bill 1. So, and this is very much a sort of a layman's description. I could bury you in the technical detail, which I've refrained from doing, but it's all available on our webpage for anybody who wants to really, drive into this, drill into the data. But for the university main campuses, we have shifted from an enrollment-based to a course and degree-based completion formula. The course and degree completion measures vary by cost. Our data system permits us to measure the cost per degree or the cost per course. So we pay more relatively for an engineering course or an engineering degree than we do for humanities or for an English degree, because the costs are so much higher. And we literally can calculate down to the course section both the direct and indirect cost of every course. We have an empirically based adjustment for at-risk students. And I can't emphasize enough the need and the significance for this. We literally calculate the difference between the success rates for non-need-based and need-based aid students. We've operationalized at-risk students as need-based students. And we provide campuses with a boost of anywhere between 0.1 and I think 0.6 for their ability to have need-based students succeed in their courses and in their degrees. If we didn't do that, we would have penalized our access campuses unbelievably. And I'm still not comfortable that A, that we've measured at-risk students completely in this measure, and B, whether or not we should contemplate not only holding access campuses harmless for their performance, but actually giving them a boost for enrolling these students and having these students succeed. I would joke among our formula consultation members that if we didn't do this, then we could simplify our formula simply by splitting the money between Ohio State University and Miami University and giving everybody else zero, because that would be the effect. The access campuses would suffer tremendously. And the degree completion and component will be phased in slowly, as is the overall formula will be phased in. But the degree completion component is only 5% of the formula in 2010. Course completion is 95%. There's a closer correspondence between the distribution of funds based upon degree completion and enrollments than there is, I'm sorry, between course completion and enrollments than there is between the correspondence between degree completion and enrollments. So that provides a little stability, but we don't intend to cut any campus's legs off as we move toward this new formula. And over time, we expect that degree completion component to increase 5 percentage points a year to the point where it will be 25 or 30% of the overall formula allocation. Could you go back, Marilyn? It's important to note we have set-asides for doctoral and medical funding, and we've already started to make doctoral funding more dynamic and to allocate our doctoral funds on the basis of the research success of campuses and the placement of doctoral students in various programs, and we'll probably make it more dynamic and success-based over time. We have not decided to do that for medical funding right now, although there's a separate discussion of medical and allied health underway in Ohio. And another important point is that we phase the overall formula in over time. This is true for all three formulas. There's a 99% stop loss in 2010, which means we calculate the formula on the basis of the new metrics, but no campus will lose more than 1 percentage point in 2010 relative to 29. No campus will lose more than 2 percentage points in 2011 relative to 2009. And we expect that within 5 years, at the point at which we're about at the 95% stop loss, you've pretty much phased in the entire formula. So we're looking at about a 5-year flight plan here to land and to roll out the entire formula. Next slide. We have 23 university regional campuses, all of which they're spread throughout the state, and they have different missions and different identities that have kind of accreted over time. One of the major goals of the strategic plan is to create and promote the use of what we call 2+2 or 3+1 programs to encourage students to lower their out-of-pocket expenses by taking the first 2 years of a baccalaureate degree at a community college and the last 2 years at a regional campus or university, main campus. And the great advantage of the regional campuses is that there are more of them than the universities, and they're cheaper relative to the universities. And in fact, in 8 cases, they are adjacent to a community college. They're literally next door to a community college. And for example, there's one co-located campus in southeastern Ohio, which is a seriously economically deprived part of the state, where the regional campus has adopted the fees of its adjacent community college. And if I've done the math right, a student can get what we call a kind of a meat and potatoes baccalaureate degree in business, education, maybe IT, from the combination of those two schools over 4 years for $15,000 or $16,000. So you can be place-bound, price-sensitive, receive a baccalaureate degree from an institution, in this case, a regional campus, which is affiliated with Ohio University, will have Ohio University's stamp of approval, and we would make higher education much more accessible to our Appalachian population in that manner. But for the regional campuses, they have yet to really fully develop their degree completion identity or mission. So for the next 2 years, the formula for the regional campuses will be based entirely on the course completion-based formula. We shift away from the enrollment to the course completion-based. We have the same elements of cost involved. It's identical to the formula for the university main campuses. We have the empirically based adjustment for the at-risk students, which is extremely significant for the regional campuses because they do tend to serve many more at-risk students than the university main campuses. We plan to add the degree completion component in 2 to 4 years, depending upon the ability of the regional campuses to develop these, I don't know whether it's 3 to 6 baccalaureate degree programs, and to fully articulate those programs to become the upper division delivery system with either their sister community college or with other community colleges in the state. And we have a similar phase-in of a 99 to 98% stop loss. Okay, next slide, please. For the community colleges, we will continue to have the cost-based enrollment formula as the major basis of funding. Right now, it is 100%. It will be 95% next year. It will probably get no lower than 80% over time. We need to do this because the community colleges experience both the surge and the waxing and waning of enrollments as the economy improves or decreases. We expect our community colleges, some of our community colleges this fall, to experience a 30 to 40% increase in enrollments because of the state of Ohio's economy. And you simply need an enrollment-based formula to be able to allocate funds, or, in the case when funds are flat, to reallocate funds to the campuses that are growing more relative to those that are not growing as much, so that you sustain on an average basis. The average state subsidy per student remains the same across the system. So there's no debate on that either at the Board of Regents, the Chancellor, or among our community colleges. The one thing we are doing, which I'm really excited about, is we will add in 2011 the state of Washington's concept of momentum points to the formula. It will be 5% of the formula in 2011, and the enrollment-based formula will be 95%. And the momentum points share of the total funding will increase over time to the point where it's about 25 or 30%. And once again, this will be phased in over time as well with the similar stop loss. Next slide, please. What are momentum points? I don't know if this group has been exposed to this concept, but it is probably one of the most exciting funding ideas I've seen for community colleges in a very long time. It is based upon the very, very good research that the Columbia Teachers College, and in particular Professor Davis Jenkins, has been doing for years, trying to identify the paths to success for community college students. Momentum points are measures of student success that are sensitive to the community college's mission and students. It's a very simple methodology. You get 1 point for each one of the success points that you identify. It's unweighted by student or program or level or cost. The points that we will probably include in our formula, we've already done various models, is that each community college will receive 1 point for every student who's enrolled in a community college while also enrolled in high school. For every opportunity for dual enrollment, you get a point. For every student who passes remedial coursework, you'll get a point. Or if you pass 3 remedial courses, you get 3 points. For every student who passes college-level math, you get a point. Every student who achieves 15 credit hours, 30 credit hours, 45 credit hours, an associate degree, or transfers to a university successfully, you get a point. And over time, community colleges have embraced this. It was seem common sense to them. The distribution of funds is not the same as it is for the enrollment-based formula that, in effect in Ohio, and we're talking among friends here, you know what a challenge it is for developmental education, where I know, at least for some of our programs, we tend to churn students in and out. They use up their financial aid, they use up their loan programs trying to pass the developmental ed program. And basically what we'd like to do over time, and I don't know if we'll ever get there, is to stop supporting or greatly reduce the amount of support we provide to campuses that don't help students succeed in developmental ed, and shift some of those resources to ABLE programs, to career technical programs, or to some third-party provider that will help those students achieve some post-secondary education certificate or success. Go back to the other slide, Marilyn, please, just for a minute. One flaw in momentum points is that the points are not sensitive to cost. So the campuses that heavily invest in technical programs, in engineering technologies and allied health in particular, could suffer a loss of funds. Now, at least in Ohio, those campuses that tend to heavily emphasize those programs, I don't want to say they're more selective, but students succeed more highly in those programs than in many of the other general education types of programs. So they don't necessarily would experience the loss of a share of funds. But we want to be sensitive to that, and we have a continuing consultation this year where we may look at a way to weight some of those courses for their costs because they are extremely expensive. Okay, next slide. We have continuing discussions. We have a political problem as well as a budgeting problem. We have significant discontinuities between 2009 and a formula that simply had a uniform increase of about 10% for all campuses. And moving from that uniform increase where the rising tide lifted all boats to a much more dynamic formula where there are winners and losers. So we spent a lot of time doing the analysis and trying to, we did it, I think, successfully, to explain to the General Assembly why these losers and winners are there. And so we had a column of data that would show the campuses that were more successful, course completions, degree completions. There's another element for a boost for STEM programs, et cetera, et cetera. And we successfully did it because they accepted it in House Bill 1. A number of campuses still continued to complain that they experienced a 10% increase in 2009, and they're going to lose 1% in 10 and 2% in 11, and they don't know what they're going to do. And our answer to them is that, well, you try to get more course completions and degree completions, and you will change your future. As you know, I talked a lot about the stop loss, and I've just mentioned the detailed explanations of changes in funding, so we succeeded in that. Okay. As I said, we have continuing discussions about who is an at-risk student. I for one, wanted three elements. I wanted need-based, a student who's financially needy, a student who starts school after the age of some cutoff. I don't know what, we had to debate about this. I was going to say 21. If you start school after the age of 21 or 22, start college, there should be some measure of at risk. And if you are a student who needed developmental education, that I would use those three elements. The community college folks have had a variety of other measures as well, so we're going to continue this discussion and hopefully improve our measure of an at-risk students. I don't think anyone disagrees about the need to broaden that definition. Part of our problem is data. We don't necessarily have the data that we'd want. As you probably all know, one important measure is first generation in college. That is self-reported data in the FAFSA. I don't know how reliable those data are. We would need to have to drill into that to make sure that we're comfortable that those data are appropriately reported. And we will continue, this is kind of a back burner thing, but we will continue to look at how we can make doctoral medical funding more dynamic and success and performance-based, because we spend so much money, in terms of our relative proportions, probably $350 million a year on doctoral funding and medical funding. What made this all possible is the fact that we used a significant portion of our state fiscal stabilization funds in 2010 and 2011. We received Ohio receives about $3 billion each from the SFSF, and 10% of that went to higher education. We received $309 million a year, which accounts for about 15 to 20% of our base formula. This is wonderful for us for 2010 and 2011. Everyone's looking at 2012. Everyone sees the cliff that we're going to hit in 2012, and we're already planning ahead for that. But one of the things that these funds have enabled us to do, we would not have been able to implement the formula as we have without this level of funding. It's also enabled us to keep tuition below 3.5% increases in 2010 and 2011. And by Ohio's historical standards, where we were in the double-digit rates of increase in the early 2000s, this is significant. We froze fees in 2008 and 2009, so we've really focused on affordability, and this will continue to enable us to do so. Observations about planning and implementation of how we did this. In August of 2007, the chancellor said, "Well, we got to change the way we're doing business. We have to, we have to create a formula based upon completely on outcomes and success-based. So this is a takeoff from Edward Munch's The Scream, and this is the way I felt for about 2 weeks in late August. We had just completed a formula review, and I think panic and anxiety is okay for a couple weeks. And after that, though, we dove into the process. And I just want to make some observations of feedback that I've gotten from our consultation members as we started this and as we proceeded to create our formula. Don't try to boil the ocean. Different states are in different places in terms of their ability and their comfort with success-based formulas. You don't have to do everything all the time right away. I think we were lucky in that we did have this almost 15-year glide path to using success-based formulas through our challenges, and so we didn't take a huge step when we moved from those to our new formulas. I think any state that doesn't have that history of performance and empirically based performance-based funding and tries to go completely to a success-based formula would have some significant challenges. Remember the case method, copy and steal everything. This is what was told to me by our friends from the state of Washington when I called them to thank them for the information they had provided to me. They said they follow the same method, that they had copied it from Columbia University, and certainly we would be happy and proud if you would copy and steal anything that we're doing. It's all in the public realm. One size does not fit all. We wrestled long and hard because prior to 2010 we had one formula for all three sectors, and we tried to create a single formula that was sensitive to the different missions of the three campuses, and ultimately discovered that short of calculus and infinite mathematics we would be incapable of doing that, and creating three separate formulas greatly eased the challenges that we had and enabled each one of the sectors and their leaders to focus on what they thought was important, and for the state to be able to tell them what the state thought was important in achieving the goals. Consultation is obviously, you all know, is so significant. The first meeting we had of our college and universities in the first week of August was relatively tense and a bit confusing, but over time we turned stakeholders into co-creators, into implementers, into what are now essentially advocates. The university presidents and the associations will brag about their performance, and over time as we implement this more, you will see the universities in their brochures and on their web pages announce that the average undergraduate achieves his or her degree in 4.2 years at Miami University or Ohio State, and they will use our data to brag about that. Remember, while the Soviet Union failed, you maximize focus on outcomes, you minimize focus on inputs or micromanagement, give campuses the greatest discretion possible to achieve the goals within the culture and the history of your state. In Ohio, we have a very small staff at the Board of Regents, and we almost have I don't want to say micromanagement, but very, very little regulation in terms of the procedures that campuses have to follow. We have tremendous focus on outputs, obviously, in terms of the formulas, but also in terms of financial performance and in terms of the state of the facilities. So we hold campuses responsible for the outcomes of essential elements of their missions and let them decide the best way to achieve the goals of those. Data. Timely and reliable student unit record data system is needed for both planning and evaluation. I spoke to Susan Brown this morning, and I understand that you're on the path through your longitudinal data system to create that, and congratulations. It's a wonderful tool to have, and we've had one for 30 years. And we're able to, as I mentioned before, not only identify cost and by course section and track students within higher education, but through the use of ACT and SAT data, link them to their performance in high school to identify the extent to which their high school experience contributed to their college success or failure. But we can track them into the workplace and find out by campus, by level, by program, by degree, how much money they make in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and feed that information back to campuses so they're aware of the career trajectories of their students and potentially of the need to change either career advising or curriculum. And obviously protect the base. There was no way we could have done this had we not had the phase-in of the stop losses. No campus, I mean, just realistically speaking, aside from politics, aside from anything else, no campus can afford to experience a loss of 10 or 15 or 20% of its state funding in a very short period of time. And it's unfair to them, unfair to the students to do that. So protecting the base but having the phase-out, we feel makes a lot of sense. We've also been experimenting with performance-based student grant initiatives to try to reward success for need-based aid students. We created a program called the TANF Educational Awards Program, or TEAP. We used surplus TANF funds in 2007. It's almost ancient history to think of something such as surplus TANF funds, but we did have surplus TANF funds, and we created a new grant program for TANF-eligible students. And for those of you not familiar with TANF, the federal TANF program, the TANF-eligible students are really the poorest of the poor. This is temporary aid for needy families, I believe is the acronym. And we created our eligible students were independent students who had one or more dependents and who had an expected family contribution of 0. But we added to that, so that's a standard measure of need, but we added to that the student had to have completed at least 15 credit hours of college work and who were enrolled for at least 3 credit hours during the term that they were eligible to apply for the grant. The next slide, please. The maximum grant was $1,200 for a full-time student, $600 for a part-time student, and this was over and above any other need-based aid the student would receive. The grants were distributed 1/3 at the start of the term, 2/3 at the end of the term. And the students had to successfully complete the courses to receive the final grant portion. We permitted a very broad use of funds for child care, transportation, books, materials, equipment, anything that contributed to the student's ability to get to and attend and study for their courses. This is just a brief table that describes the outcomes. Just for what it's worth, we looked at the TEAP and the non-TEAP population before the program, and they were identical in terms of their performance, in terms of the GPA, in terms of their success, etc. After the TEAP program, this is one year, the TEAP program was only in effect 1 year, we had a course completion rate of 82% for the TEAP students, 70% for the non-TEAP students. A GPA, and this is an increase for the TEAP students, of 2.79 versus 2.54 for the non-TEAP students. The persistence plus the graduation rate was 82% for the TEAP students and only 60% for non-TEAP. And full-time attendance for the TEAP students, it increased to 52%, and it was half that rate for the non-TEAP students. It was a quasi-experimental design, obviously. It was the best we could do given the resources available. But we have another program this year. We're working with, it's a smaller program with fewer funds, but we're working with MDRC in New York to evaluate the program. We're using a random assignment of students to the experimental and control groups. And this is supported not only through some state funds, but Gates is paying for a 3rd or 4th term for our TEAP students. And this will be fully evaluated next year. So we're thrilled to get MDRC involved. We're thrilled that this has risen to the level of the attention of Hillary Pennington and the folks at the Gates Foundation. They think it's something to invest in. I think they're investing a couple $3 million to continue the grants for these students, and we'll be really excited to see the results of the true experiment probably a year from now. We'll have it done. I want to make one last comment about improving our measures or improving our concept about measures of success. You all probably know very well the statistic that's published in newspapers in which reporters and television commentators pick up that only 50 to 56% of all first-time, full-time students enrolled at university main campuses achieve their degree in 6 years. So it looks like we're about half successful and half failure. We've been looking at this for some time. We've been trying to connect our data to other data sources to examine whether or not this measure needs to be changed. The problem with the measure is that this is the federal graduation rate statistic. It is a gross measure of degree completion. It ignores intermediate steps to ultimate student success, and it ignores, most particularly, changing student enrollment dynamics such as transfers. The federal statistic, I believe, still to this day, insist upon measuring as the initial student cohort, that initial student cohort that graduates from that same institution, when in fact we know that between 20 and 40% of all students will transfer or take some other courses or be mobile or fluid as they pursue their academic careers. So they never included interinstitutional or interstate or intra-institutional or intrastate measures of success. And as a result, we believe that this federal measure grossly underestimates student success. You can skip that on the table. You have this in your slide. You can look at this at what we call our enhanced measure of a 6-year graduation rate. Now, I won't spend any time on that, but go to the next slide, please.
I'd like to just include, because there's continues to be the misconception by many institutions in Texas that we don't include transfers. And I just want, in our graduation rates, and so what you just flashed by looks like what we've been doing for about 22 years, in fact, in terms of graduation rates. So I just want to make sure everyone knows here that we count every student wherever they graduate from a public institution. In fact, now we track to private universities as well in that graduation rate.
Great. Well, and now we have to convince our friends in Washington that they ought to do that as well. So this is one measure of academic success for Ohio. The blue number is the success rate for what we call the home baccalaureate student, the student who enrolled at University X and achieved his or her degree in 6 years. The red is the transfer baccalaureate degree success rate, and these are for students who transfer to other public institutions in Ohio. We haven't gone as far as the private schools. We hope to do that if we can ever get data from our private colleagues. The yellow number is the number of students in the cohort who achieved an associate's degree. Arguably a measure of success, perhaps not the measure of success the federal government wants us to do, but associate degree means something in this economy. And then the green is the percentage of students who are still enrolled at the end of 6 years. Now, is that a measure of success? Yes or no? But it's a measure of persistence. I mean, when you think about it, it's an amazing testament to the students who have persisted over 6 years or are still enrolled, which means they're serious about trying to achieve a degree. So you move from a 55% measure of success to roughly 73% measure in the way that we would like to promote it in Ohio. Next slide, please. And we have an analogous measure for two-year campuses where we have an enhanced measure of success, where we look at a degree achievement, persistence at the same institution, or persistence at a different institution over a 3-year period. And if you just simply look at degree completion for 2-year schools, the percentages have always been low. But when you look at this broader measure, you're moving up to the 50 and 60% level of success. And once again, it's and the same reason for the 4-year schools. I think it's an important measure of success. But that's not the whole story. We do not regularly or uniformly take into account the movement of students across state borders. It's probably, I don't know how much of an issue this is for Texas, but for Ohio, between us and Michigan and Indiana and Kentucky and West Virginia and Pennsylvania and even New York, we have a lot of students who live on the borders and are able to move through among a number of states. And if you live in southeastern Ohio, you can enroll in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky all at the same time, and Ohio, all within driving distance. So we've been using the National Student Clearinghouse data to try to extend our analysis. The National Student Clearinghouse data has national data on student success and student degrees. It is not as complete as we would like it to be, but it is one good measure. And we've matched former Ohio enrollees with students enrolled in or receiving a degree from an institution outside of Ohio. And the result of that, and we'll go to the next slide, we push our measure of success up to about 76%. We found about 3.4% of the students have achieved a degree who were enrolled in that original cohort achieved a degree in Ohio, outside of Ohio during this time period. And we think that once we include the private schools and once the National Clearinghouse gets a fuller universe of students, we'll be in the vicinity of 80 to 85%. I don't know whether that's true or not, but clearly it's going to be a higher number than this. And this is very persuasive. This has been very persuasive to members of our General Assembly to see, to go from a frame of thought where they think we're experiencing a 50% failure rate among the universities to seeing the broader context of success. For more information, you have the links to our 10-year strategic plan. There's a link there to the momentum points as used by the state of Washington, and also the actual academic study is conducted at Columbia Teachers College. And for those of you who really have a lot of free time in your hands and like data and small text, we have a complete description of our formulas and all the data used on our website in that last link on that last slide. So welcome your examination of those, and I welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Usually a shy group.
I just have one question. At the very beginning, you talked about your research challenge formula. Can you briefly describe, if it's possible, the metrics that you use to, I guess it's a percentage applied to research expenditures? Can you share the percentages with us?
It is the simplest measure in the world. We measure the amount of third-party revenues a university received in the prior year from something outside of the state, so it had to be federal or private. And we sum it for all the universities, and each university gets its proportionate share of whatever's available for research funding for that year. It varies between $12 and $20 million. So it's the simplest thing in the world to explain. Budget people do this stuff all the time, but when you talk to the graduate research officers or talk to members of our various legislative committees, etc., they get it. The more successful you are in competing, and these are all competitive grants. So if you get a grant from a donor, that doesn't count. It's important for you to do that, and there may be other reasons why we want to match that. But these are all primarily NIH, NSF, and privately received funds.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Before we split up into all the individual groups, we wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up about the stimulus funding next week, and we'll be sending out more specific information. We're going to be having a webinar about some of the reporting requirements that are going to be in place for the incentive funding. We're trying to get some more clarification on that as we speak. But for the general academics, you're going to have incentive funding, and then for the community colleges, it's part of your formula funding. For the general academics, we are hoping that you will each be considered primary recipients. for your formula funding, but you will have the incentive funding, and for the community colleges, it looks like you're going to be sub-recipients. We're still getting clarification on that one, too. But we'll be having a webinar next week, and we'll send out more information on that and what the reporting requirements are going to be and that sort of thing. So now we're going to break up into our groups, and the community and technical colleges are in boardroom B, which is back there. Health-related, we're going to be in the Lone Star. Universities are going to be in here. So thank you very much. Well, we can be